Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am so delighted and honored on this episode to be talking with someone who has consistently been kind, Mr. Darryl Banks. I've met you twice at Heroes Con now. You've also stopped by another podcast that I do with a friend named Adam called The Comic Obsessive, and so always glad to talk with you. May I call you Darryl?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Glad to be here, Jason.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I know when you were on the Comic Obsessive, we talked a lot about Green Lantern because you are known as a formative person in the world of Green Lantern and Kyle Rayner. And so I know today we're going to talk about a few other titles that you've worked on, one of them involving Green Lantern and someone named Norrin Rad, that person that's out there in the cosmic universe. But
Uh-huh.
before we get around to that, I'm just curious, especially thinking about, those kind of cosmic stories, and we were just talking about Star Wars before I hit record. What have comics allowed you to do in telling stories that are just amazingly fantastic? Those cosmic stories of space and well beyond the well-traveled world.
The interesting thing about cosmic stories is that they can be completely made up. I mean, because they're fictitious. I mean, some of the most challenging projects I've ever worked on dealt with period pieces, from American history, where
Hmm.
I have to have as many things. I can't say perfect, but as many things right as possible. I mean, and I enjoy that, but when you get a chance to really just let your mind go and just wonder what if this, what if that, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a whole, and but however, because of that, you don't want to go too far out where you lose a reader. You've got to ground certain designs in just enough reality where it makes visual sense, especially.
Hmm.
But working on cosmic things such as Legion of Superheroes, that was my first DC project I ever worked on, and it's very, I think, influenced by Star Trek, I think, in many ways.
Hmm.
So it's got a lot of cosmic aspects, of course, and that dovetailed right into Green Lantern.
Yeah, yeah. What's it like to kind of take that from the scripted page? Because I can imagine what it must feel like to sort of read like, oh, this is set here and this is happening, and then to get to sort of bring that to visual life.
When you work with a writer, especially when I have a rapport with, like, Ron Mars,
Hmm.
he's a writer, but he thinks very visually in his script, and I think that has a lot to do with his influences and his neighbors. I think about back then, he had neighbors like Bernie, the late great Bernie Wrights, and Jim Starl, and of course Terry Austin, and the list goes on. So I think having friends who are artists, I feel like that influences his writing style. So his scripts are very uh, not specific where I felt like I'm limited, but he has a very strong sense of how cool something will look, you know.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
especially when we worked on uh, Green Lantern, uh, many times he'll just say he'll have an idea of, wouldn't it be cool if we did this. He was good at asking my opinion. I think I work best when I'm working with a writer that wants my input rather than just. There's nothing wrong with just, here's the script, you draw it. That's the industry standard. But
Hmm.
with Green Lantern, I feel like Ron and I, we actually teamed up. He really wanted my input. The editor wanted my input, and I feel like they got more out of me because of that.
Yeah, yeah. And the visuals tell such a powerful part of that story. It's really behooves a creative team to invite the artist in that way, I would imagine.
You would think, but it's like I said,
Hmm.
it's that's not the industry norm. But I understand it's pretty much set in stone for the longest. But it's like when you have a creative team that's that has everyone's on a similar page, I think you'll get more of a you'll get more of a interesting result, I feel.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to ask you about, of course, the merging of Marvel and DC, because there was this moment in the mid 90s where the unthinkable happened and Marvel characters and DC characters started interacting, which doesn't happen that often.
No.
And then later on, I think it was around 2000, 2001, there was an Imagine If Stan Lee created DC kind of thing. But again, just not something that happens all the time. So I'm curious about how this meeting of Silver Surfer and Green Lantern came to be.
Well, when it was pitched to me that they wanted to do it, I was over the moon about it because when I was a kid in elementary school when uh, Superman versus Spider-Man came out,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I just, that was a book that, as a kid I couldn't afford it. I think it was like $1 or something, but I could get a comic that was 25 cents here and there, but this oversized uh, epic meeting of Marvel and DC icons. It was years later until I could get it. But working when Green Lantern Silver Surfer was pitched to me, it's kind of like now not going to be huge physical media, but the meeting itself is something that was pretty epic, and I was very excited about. And to this day, out of all the cool things I've worked on in my career, Green Lantern Silver Surfer sits at the top because of what it meant, what we were able to do, characters that I've always wanted to draw.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing was that I didn't know that was going to be amongst the forerunners for more Marvel and DC crossovers because there were things I pitched out. When we were fleshing out the script, I said, "Well, wouldn't it be cool if we saw like some Justice League, Avengers kind of a thing going on, and this, that, and the other?" They were like, "Well, there's a reason we can't do that." Every time I would pitch something, my editor goes, "Well," because he couldn't say the big
Hmm.
Marvel DC crossover was about to happen. They were keeping it hush hush, even amongst talent. So thinking back, like, oh, that's why we couldn't have this because they had a bigger picture. I just thought, we had the John Byrne Dark Side Galactus special, whatever I think came out shortly before ours, and
Hmm.
I just thought it was just a couple of one-offs and that was it. But it was like, oh no, no, this is going to be a big deal crossover that's going to last a little while. So
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
I still would like to see that happen again. I mean, it's more like
Oh yeah.
you see DC doing it with, you've got there was a Justice League meets Godzilla and King Kong. DC
Hmm.
is big about crossover, Ninja Turtles, you name it. It's just I don't know, House of Mouse. They just I guess they don't really want to do that, but it would be in their best interest to do it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
money in it. I figure at the end of the day, isn't that why? So, but when Green Lantern Silver Surfer was first pitched to me, yeah, and then the question is who's going to ink me? And boy, I became the the industry's favorite penciler. Hey, Darryl, you got an inker yet? Oh man, I got that question over and over again. But of course, had to be Terry Austin since
Yes.
he wasn't my regular inker at the time. He inked me on a Green Lantern Corps quarterly issue, and so of course I wanted to work with him again on this. And like I said, it was to this day still my favorite pound for pound project I've ever worked on.
Yeah, yeah. You get to work with characters like Thanos and bringing Parallax into that world and all of those things. So, just a great merging, and it made perfect sense to have those
Mm-hmm.
characters come together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree. We should see more of that. DC, even Hanna-Barbera, they have some
Mm-hmm.
Hanna-Barbera crossovers, so
Right,
that
right.
would be great to see. Yeah. Now, I was also going to ask about another project of yours that we hadn't talked about before, and that is getting to work on characters like the Phantom. So I love how you go from like the cosmic to kind of the Earth-based. Phantom is a very different world. So curious about what that kind of like move is like from getting to draw the nebula and the universe down to that.
Having even before I excuse me, my first work with DC may have been Legion of Superheroes, but I had spent a good 5 years or so in the independent comics doing whatever I get my hands on. I mean, so
Mhm.
amongst some of my first projects were things like the Wild Wild West, based on an old TV show,
Mhm.
Doc Savage, Man of Bronze. So I kind of think of myself as I've got to be professional enough to whatever assignment I accept, I should be able to do it. So I was kind of used to being able to change gears. So and the Phantom I just did covers for, but
Mhm.
again, I've done all types of things where it just do it to the best of my ability and hope people like it. Um, like I mentioned earlier, period pieces. I did recently a story with DC Comics Amazing Man from the All Star Squadron. That was a period piece. So I worked on a graphic novel set in World War II with Ron Mars for an indie publisher. So if it's in front of me, I've got to I got to give it my best. So
Oh,
so
yeah.
moving from something as far out as Green Lantern Silver Surfer doing covers for the Phantom, that's just that's just how it goes for me in my career.
Yeah. Yeah. You still get to play with cool toys as part of
Right,
the
that's the thing.
process and cool
Green Lantern
characters.
Silver Surfer was the coolest toy of them all. I mean, I remember if there was a double page spread of the birth of the Silver Surfer when Galactus is creating him. That
Uh,
wasn't in the original script. I
oh,
I
nice.
harassed Ron Mars day and night to put that in there because I'm thinking this is probably going to be my only shot at drawing Galactus professionally. You got to let me do it. He goes, I said, well, and they are explaining who they were to one another, so it's not like it didn't make sense. And he thought about it. Was like, yeah, it does make sense. I think at first maybe it was going to be a panel. I said, no, you got to give me a double spread. Yeah, so how that got in there. I talked him
Nice.
into it. I said, and think about how cool that's going to look. And he was like, because like I said, he thinks very visually. So like, yeah, that would look cool. So that's how that happened.
Nice, nice. And that's what you want in a writer, that visual thinking, the collaboration. Love it. Love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Now you also continue to do covers. You're out there still creating and still making things in the world of comics. So I'm curious about anything that currently has your creative attention that you would like to talk about, that you can talk about. And then I also generally ask about spaces where people can connect. So as I was saying, I know we've connected at Heroes Con, but if there are places online or other go-to places for you, curious to hear about that.
I'm on Instagram is probably my favorite, and I'm on
Mhm.
X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I have a Facebook, but I'm not on it that much. Pretty much, Facebook is some of the one of the only ways I can connect to some of my family members that live in other states, so I maintain it. But as far as my regular posting, I'd say Instagram and X. Um, Covers, yeah, whatever I get a chance to do. My most recent DC cover was a variant cover for Cyborg.
Mhm, mhm.
As far as what I've been working on, I just finished a graphic novel for an indie publisher called Strider Nolan Media. It's a horror story called The Horror Show.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
just finished that, of course, cover and interior. I did black and white and had a good color artist, taking it from there. The Kickstarter for that should be launching very soon, if not the end of this month, possibly next month. So, and in the meantime, what else am I working on? I'm thinking, what do I have to? Oh, there's a company called philsingergames.com, and I do a lot of character cards for them of some of the characters from their gaming module. Sometimes I'll have to design them, or I'll just put a modern day spin because they've been in business since the '80s. So um,
Nice.
I'll be working on their current card set. It's what I actually just began last week. So uh, what's been going on with me.
Cool, cool. That's a whole other kind of areas, the like heroic cards, because I tell you, that was my introduction to a lot of characters that I
Oh yeah.
hadn't seen the books for, the spans of trading card sets and things like that. So I'll be sure and link that site as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. And curious to see your work in horror. I don't think that's a genre I've seen your work in quite as much.
That's a first for me. It is an absolute first. Matter of fact, when Michael Katz, who the co-owner of the company, had pitched that to me, because we had a great relationship when we worked on their Kickstarter called Riot Earp,
Hmm.
also written by Ron Mars. This
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
a funded Kickstarter. It's a sci-fi story, kind of a sci-fi thriller in a way. And so, actually, while that was still going on, Michael had asked me, like, "How do you feel about doing a horror story?" And I'm thinking, I like being employed, so bring it on. He said, "Have you ever done horror before?" I'm like, "I have not," but it's the first time for everything. So
Uh-huh.
uh, it's a horror story. Again, it's kind of a period piece, kind of set in the '80s. Almost like imagine what Sci-Fi Channel used to show back in the day, or imagine
Hmm.
VHS tape. That was the look we were going for. So Hopefully people like it. Like I said, this is my first time trying to do horror. It's not to spoil it, but it's pretty much a thing where a main character has to figure out people are turning up missing or finding, something's killing campers in the wintertime in Minnesota. Is it a person? Is it a creature? What is it? We've got to find out. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's uh, kind of a little sneak preview of what you can expect from horror shows. So, uh,
Nice, nice.
I like how it came out. I really enjoyed working on it.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing it, and please do send me the Kickstarter link, and I'll also post it here as well.
Oh, great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Well, Daryl, always great to talk with you. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share before we close out in terms of upcoming appearances or anything like that?
Let's see. My upcoming appearances. Well, I'd say be sure to check my X and my Instagram when I post my convention schedule. Um, I don't have any this month, but I think my first show might be in April. I think I've got a couple of shows in April, but I would
Great.
say keep checking my social media where I post my appearances, that sort of thing. Did you have any questions? Maybe some of your students may have had, or something that you may have been thinking of, something you'd like to share with your class.
Oh yeah, that is a great question. I think that um, they would probably ask probably technique questions because I have several. They use a lot of them use Procreate and things like that to
Okay.
explore. Um, so curious about any tips that you might give them, maybe things to keep in mind,
Okay.
like artistically.
I will use Procreate once in a great while. Mainly,
Hmm.
it's on my iPad. When my father, before he passed away, he was in and out of the hospital, and some of my commercial art, to keep up with deadlines, I would Procreate allowed me to continue to work while I was in a waiting room, that sort of thing. But for my work, like I mentioned, horror show, that I did completely digital with a program called Clip Studio Paint,
Hmm. Hmm.
and a little Photoshop, but mainly all my work, especially for publication, like my covers for DC or et cetera. All that's done with Clip Studio Paint with a little Photoshop here and there.
Yeah, yeah, they are digital creatures. My students are. I've had students create like adaptations of The Great Gatsby and all of these things using Procreate, and so it's amazing to see what they do, and then to see how they design characters and things like that. So just yeah, excited to see where they take it to, and hopefully getting inspired by episodes like this
I
to
hope
keep
so. I hope
creating.
so. Now I still use traditional media for my commission art. Um,
Hmm.
or just recently, I bought myself a sketchbook because so often when I draw, it's always for something. And some of our friends that they'll post on their social media the sketches they did for themselves. I'm thinking, I remember that concept. Normally after 10 hours, at the table, I'm kind of done with drawing. But I
Hmm.
thought, remember, you love doing this. So I bought myself a sketchbook and just you know started to just draw just stuff that I wanted to draw. Just real quick stuff. So I'll still use traditional pen, ink, marker, but for my published work, yeah, that's pretty much digital, and it's very expedient, especially for the publishers, because I don't have to scan artwork. I can just finish the file and send it to them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I've even had students this year do some watercolor things, which is interesting. I'm curious, do you use particular tools, types of pens that you would recommend to them, things like that?
I will. I did some commissions where I used some watercolor and some wash sets I just got on Amazon.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mainly because even my commission work tends to be black and white, but I wanted to challenge myself to delve back into color, because actually my very first published work was a mixed media comic. Back in 1989 was my first book. So I thought, I started the game with in color, but I kind of, I don't know, lack confidence, and so I just focused on black and white. And I thought, get back into it, have
Hmm.
some fun with it. So yeah, I watercolor, gouache, uh, but usually especially lately, when I'm sketching for myself, I like to use Copic markers.
Hmm.
Um, uh, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, Yeah. The cool thing, as we talked on this episode too, is you can use the medium to tell a cosmic story, a story that's set, in a world like the Phantom, a horror story, Western. So just love the medium and appreciate what you do. There's a print of Silver Surfer and Green Lantern that hangs on my wall. So
Oh yeah,
much
okay.
appreciation. Yep. Yep.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you back anytime to talk about things. Did we miss anything other than that you want to make sure to mention?
Um, Not that I can think of, but uh, but I definitely appreciate you having me on your show, Jason.
Yeah, yeah, great to talk with you. And uh, thanks for, again, the consistent kindness. I said this on the Comic Obsessive, but when I was a kid in the 90s, I mailed you a letter and you mailed me back like a sketch of Kyle Rayner signed.
Really?
And so, yeah, yeah, way,
Wow.
way back there. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay, that's great.
One of the millions of times you've drawn that character, but
Right.
it
Okay.
made my year. So,
Oh,
um,
fantastic.
yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. So much appreciation.